say that.
I like to have hope, and I like to trust God. Dang, it's God ain't got this.
This ain't God.
This
the devil.
Welcome to the John Amanchukwu Show. Do me a big favor and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for your support. Now, in this episode, we would take a look at the slide that Shedeur Sanders experienced, during the past NFL draft. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, man. I'm hurt by this thing. I'm hurt by it. I wanted him to make it as a top 5 pick. That's pretty much what his dad said about a year ago. You know, he was claiming that his son was going to be a top 5 pick. I wanted the same thing for him. You know, he played at Jackson State for a little bit. Then they went over to Colorado, and I mean, they revitalized that program. Deion Sanders and his son, and Travis Hunter, and Horn. They brought some dogs there, and they brought life. They brought life to Colorado, and so I wanted the best for him. I thought that he might have a chance to be a top 5 pick. But then, when you consider that, his dad is probably known as one of the most cocky and or arrogant athletes of all time. That was pretty much his mantra. It's pretty much his thing. It's his stick. You know what I mean? It's what he does, okay? And being a cornerback in the NFL and bringing that kind of drama that he would bring, the rapping and all of the chains and, must be the money, must be, all of that stuff, that works well when you are a cornerback, okay? And he was drafted probably some 20, 30 years ago, okay? However, that doesn't bode well when you're a quarterback and you're expected to essentially be a team leader and or an executive. That kind of brand can hurt you, especially if you go to some of your team meetings and you sandbag and or you leave early or you put no effort towards putting your best foot forward. That can hurt you. And we found out that there were some NFL owners that told their GMs and their coaches to get his name off of the draft board. Now, man, it's a business, and these owners are multi-billionaires, and they have a right to select the athletes that they want, that are going to bring the right kind of, for the lack of better words, energy and or attention towards their program. Now, I honor Deion Sanders in that he's been a actively engaged father. He didn't abandon his children like most black men have done. I have to say that, okay? Are his boys kind of like him, braggadocious, brash, arrogant, all of that stuff? I mean, they carry that vibe because that's their dad, and that's all they know. But at the end of the day, these kids don't have any major off-field issues for the most part, okay? Within a reason, you can also say that they're respectful kids, and it just recently came out that Shedeur Sanders had a 3.9 GPA, so he was an overall decent student. Are they competitors? Do they bring a show with them? Okay, are the cameras going to be on whatever team they go to? Could Shedeur mess up the climate of a locker room? Of course. Could Deion Sanders weighing in on issues upset the climate of a locker room? Of course. And I think that some team owners factored all of that in, but also just the fact that Shedeur Sanders He didn't play in an elite league like the SEC or anything like that. And so that may have impacted him, but he had some relatively decent stats. He did. His college performance at Colorado, Sanders achieved a 71.4% completion rate, which is wonderful, and passed for over 4,100 yards and finished 8th in Heisman voting. He did a great job. And it was just reported today that his jersey, is the third most sold jersey, behind Travis Hunter and Cam Ward. So there's a lot of attention on him. And there are several people who are saying that, hey, man, if he doesn't become the starter at the Browns, we're going to boycott the Browns. And so he has a lot of support on his side. But I do think that if he had to do it all over again, he would reflect and change some things and his encounters and what he said and what he didn't say at many of these team meetings that he had, because he slipped down from being a top 5 pick all the way down to number 144. Watch.
This is
So funny. It's funny when he's lost for words because
I know what's going on.
but it's funny because he never comes to a conclusion. No, he never does.
No,
He gonna be the last one to ever say
I
that.
like to have hope, and I like to trust God. Dang, God ain't got it.
This ain't God.
This
the devil. It wasn't cute after 21.
Hey, you know what? Hold it right there. Now you just have to laugh at that. You know what I mean? He said, "Man, this ain't God. No, this ain't God. God ain't in this. God ain't in this. This is the devil." And then they all just bust out laughing. The resiliency that Deion Sanders has built in his children, is admirable. They're having a jovial and light moment. Well, at the same time, they know the impact and the implications of what this means. They know that every time that he slips down from the first round to the second round to the third round to the fourth round and to the fifth round, that he's losing a lot of money. And so there was a lot of money on the line for the situation, and he lost quite a bit. Now, is he suffering? Is he hurting? No, he was already a multimillionaire in the first place while being in college. He had, Shedeur Sanders had one of the top kneel deals in the NCAA football in the first place. I believe he was probably either in the top 3 amongst people in the NCAA football program. So he's doing well. He comes from money. His father just signed, a $50 to $60 million deal in the first place. And so the guy is not hurting, but some of the things that he said, some of the things that he did impacted his draft ability. And so here they are just taking it all in, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're laughing about it. Take a look at this.
But you can explain. This is just unexplainable now.
This to the point now where you like, hey man, all right, y'all gotta stop, man. It's too hard.
All right, so there you have it. Shedeur, Shiloh, and Deion Sanders have a conversation about the impact of what the slide means for Shedeur Sanders. And in another video clip, Shiloh said, "Well, man, if you dropping down the draft board, you sliding out, man, then I don't know about me. I may not get picked up at all." And he did get picked up. He was a undrafted free agent, and he's going now to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Shiloh Sanders is. And so let's take a look at more at some of the details of this situation. Shedeur Sanders had some scouting concerns, and here are some of the critiques. He had a high sack rate, and there were questions about his arm strength and his perceived lack of elite athleticism. Albeit, he has just as, I'm sure he has as much and or more athleticism as Tom Brady and as someone like Peyton Manning, all elite quarterbacks, GOATs, I might add. He has as much athleticism or more than Aaron Rodgers, and Phillip Rivers and people like that. And so I don't know if the athleticism issue is a major problem there. Maybe the arm strength, possibly, but I don't know about the athleticism. I wouldn't say that. But he did have some major character flaws that were noted, in his character assessment. Some teams viewed Sanders as entitled or brash. Now, if after every play you're running up doing this and showing everybody your diamond watch or whatever it is, and you're flashy with all the chains and things of that nature, people may view you as entitled. He's wealthy. They're paying guys now big dollars to play collegiate football. He comes from money, and maybe the owners think that, hey, man, this guy hasn't had to struggle like a Cam Ward. He hasn't had to struggle like a Ashton Genty. And so, therefore, maybe he's not going to be hungry, and he's going to expect for everything to be handed to him on a silver platter or maybe even a gold platter. I don't know. However, people strongly believe that his attitude, potentially influenced by his father, Deion Sanders, which is which we all know to be a prominent media presence, maybe that impacted him in the draft as well, because not only do you get Shedeur, but you also get the voice of Deion Sanders, and the media loves him. They follow him. They want to hear what he has to say, and maybe a head coach didn't want to deal with those nuanced situations. And then you have some team dynamics. Deion Sanders' public statements about wanting his son to join only competent organizations. This may have deterred certain teams. Now, how do you call organizations competent? I mean, that's a dangerous statement. You only have, 33 teams. You don't want to make statements like that. Because at the end of the day, someone is going to be offended. And how do you call these organizations competent and incompetent? There may be teams that you like or prefer, but you should keep those things tight to the chest and to your vest, rather, and you should not let those things leak out, because you might end up at a team that you don't desire to play for. But at the end of the day, you're looking for an opportunity to be drafted. And there was a statement that Deion made back in 2018 about the Cleveland Browns, and it wasn't favorable, but, I guess, this is how the cookie crumbles. And his son is now being drafted by the same team that in 2018, Deion Sanders said, I wouldn't want a young athlete to go there, because of the impact of being in Cleveland. And they had made some good decisions during the offseason, but it's overall not a great program because most people don't want to play for the Cleveland Browns. You may feel that way. That may be something that you talk about in private, but you don't need to make that a public discourse. That was something in particular that Deion Sanders himself could have managed in a better way. You don't want to call teams incompetent, because if they're incompetent, then they're going to take that personal, and your son is going to drop down from being a top 5 pick to now a overall 144th pick. Okay? So here it is. Post-draft reactions, celebration. Despite the draft slide, Shedeur hosted a lavish party in Dallas, okay? Attended by celebrities like Kodak Black and Young Miami. So even with him falling out of the ranks of being a top 5 pick, he was still celebrating. Maybe that's a good look, maybe that's a bad look. I personally would not be wanting to show my face at that point. I'll be at home in prayer asking God to help me, because, now I have to go out here and face reality, because, my arrogance has landed me in the 5th round versus being a top 5 pick in the 1st round. And then you had his merchandise movement. And I'm sure the NFL didn't like this. Fans initiated a boycott of official NFL merchandise in favor of Shedeur's personal brand, Legendary, okay, potentially offsetting financial losses from his lower draft position. And so maybe he made some money there, but do you think that the NFL is going to appreciate that? Okay, so they were coming in hot from the beginning and coming in strong, and these things may have impacted them. Here's the Browns' perspective. He's a value pick, okay? Browns GM Andrew Berry viewed Sanders as a mispriced talent, believing he could outperform his draft slot. Team dynamics, the Browns had previously selected quarterback Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, which made no sense, but saw value in adding Sanders to their roster. They said to themselves, hey, man, this guy's still around in the 5th round. We might as well pick him up as well, although we have Dillon Gabriel. But, hey, it's a value pick. You know what I mean? We're getting a top 5 pick in the 5th round. We'll take it. Now, what are they going to do to work out the dynamics of their locker room when it comes to the nearly 4 or 5 quarterbacks that they have? I don't know. They have a lot of things that they need to figure out. They have Joe Flacco, they have Deshaun Watson, they have Gabriel, they have Shedeur Sanders, and I believe there's one other person. And so they're going to have a lot of work to do in this offseason to figure out what's next. I hope that Shedeur can rise to the top. Hopefully this guy has a chip on his shoulder the size of Boulder, Colorado. Hopefully he's experienced defeat to the point where he says, you know what, man, I'm going to get my head together. I'm going to focus on the X's and the O's and competing, and I'm going to get out there and show the world that these owners were wrong in passing on me, because if he doesn't, then they're going to immediately show him the door after a while. If he doesn't have the necessary arm strength or the athleticism to compete, he won't be around for a long time. And so let's talk more about Deion Sanders, his social media message. Following the draft, Deion Sanders shared a motivational message on social media. This is what he said. He said, everybody's worried about what happened yesterday and fear the possibilities of what will happen tomorrow when we should be focused on now. That's good. What do we do with our now is what matters the most. Let's make the most of our now. And those are good statements. You know, he can be sagacious, you know, and very grave at times and say things that can wow you. But he needed to give his son that same advice when he was standing before the NFL owners and managers and teams. He should have told him to take advantage of the now and not to sandbag in the interviews and not to go in there and be flippant and dismissive and, you know, call the teams competent and incompetent based upon their organizational structure. You can't do that. So if you're going to focus on the now, okay, when everything is, you know, looking like it's doom and gloom, then you have to give your son the same advice when he's standing before these NFL teams and not convince him that he's more than what he thinks that he is. It doesn't work that way. You have to prepare him for every moment. That's not, quote unquote, post the draft. That's pre-draft. Okay? Because that's what's going to set you up on the draft day. Now, previous predictions, I told you in the beginning, in May 2024, Deion confidently predicted his son would be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, stating he will be a top 5 pick. Where your son going? Laugh out loud. I got time today. He said that, and Sports Illustrated, I believe, picked that up. And so that's where we are with this situation. Also, Shedeur Sanders was pranked. He was pranked by the defensive coordinator's son. Somehow, some way, his son came home one day and dad left his laptop or iPad open, and this new cell phone number, he got his hands on it and he called Shedeur Sanders and pranked him. Now, I do strongly believe that they need to have some strong penalties and or sanctions against this NFL coach and or his son, because that's just a travesty. You know, that's ghetto. That's ratchet. You know, that's unbecoming of an individual. And the coach shouldn't be that sloppy that he just leaves personal information open for his family to see and to grab and to call someone and to prank them, during a time like this. That's just distasteful. It's not a joke. I think that personally they should allow Shedeur to have 1 minute in a room with him. And I think everything will be settled after all of that. Well, let me know what you think about this episode. Am I right or am I wrong? Am I weak or am I strong? Let me know what you think below in the comment section. God bless you and God bless America.